faithfully delivering value by interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally Book Talks. Today, the book we're interpreting is Plants and Empire, with the subtitle Colonies in the Atlantic World. This book primarily focuses on the 16th to 18th centuries, when European nations explored and utilized various plant resources during colonial expansion. And besides practical and ornamental value, what other values do you think plants have that are very important? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. In general, historical materials or works, people tend to focus more on the legendary stories of heroes or the turbulent waves of great power struggles, while plants, represented by grains and medicinal herbs, are often only recorded in the margins of history books, receiving very limited attention. However, the author of this book astutely points out that the seizure and development of plant resources were actually a key force driving historical development after Europe entered the Age of Exploration. So, this book enjoys a high reputation in the historical community and has received honors such as the Atlantic History Prize awarded by the American Historical Association. The author of this book, Rhonda Schiebinger, is a professor in the history department at Stanford University, and her research topics include Atlantic trade, slavery, and the history of herbal medicine. Due to outstanding research achievements, she also became the first woman to win the Alexander von Humboldt Research Award in the field of history. This interpretation will be divided into two parts. First, I will introduce the important roles plants played in areas such as economy and medicine during European colonial expansion. In the second part, I will talk about a plant called goldenrod. The author unfolds a series of discussions around it regarding politics, medicine, and gender relations. Before we officially begin the interpretation, I need to emphasize that this book discusses some sensitive topics, such as abortion. These issues are still highly controversial. There is still no consensus across different societies and groups. This interpretation only presents the author's views, and I hope you can approach the related content rationally and dialectically. Additionally, the content in this book about medicine and drug effects mostly describes knowledge from centuries ago. If you have related questions or concerns, please be sure to seek advice and guidance from professional doctors at a formal hospital. Well, I wonder. All right, now let's follow the author's words and embark on this exploration of plant history. First off, let's chat about after the great geographical discoveries, how developing plant resources affected European colonial powers and their colonies. Overall, it shows up in three main areas: trade, economy, daily life habits, and scientific research. Though throughout history, plants have kind of stayed in the background, but actually chasing after plants was a major driving force for Europeans exploring the world. For instance, spices like pepper and cinnamon. Back in the Middle Ages, these were total luxuries in Europe, all imported from the East. Only the nobles could get their hands on them once in a while, and Europeans went to great lengths to get these spices. They tried every method possible. Back in 1492, Columbus convinced the Spanish royals to fund his voyage, largely because he promised it would find a route to the spice-producing regions in the east. When the Age of Exploration kicked off and continents got linked by sea, it wasn't just spices. Coffee, sugarcane, tobacco, and other high-value plants spread quickly worldwide, hugely impacting global trade. Folks called these plants green gold. Even after gold and silver mines were exhausted, plants just kept growing under good conditions, bringing in constant wealth. From the 1500s to the 1700s, Europeans made a fortune by growing plants and trading them around. They brought sugarcane and coffee from the east to the west, and corn and potatoes from the west to the east, cashing in on the price differences. By the late 1700s, thousands of plantations sprang up on different continents, forming a huge industry chain and trade network covering planting, harvesting, processing, and trafficking of plants. And so back then, there wasn't any concept of preventing biological invasions or anything like that. Traders were dead set on planting crops in the most productive spots, so plants spread around the globe thanks to cargo ships and trade caravans. For instance, the Martinique Botanical Garden in the Caribbean grew over 360 different kinds of plants from every corner of the globe. You could see varieties from Peru to Japan, Madagascar to Egypt, all in one place. As new plant species were introduced, Europe didn't only bring wealth, it completely changed the lives of local folks. Before this, European diets were kind of dull. Staple foods were mostly grains like wheat, with cabbage and carrots, and average families had just basic seasonings like salt, sugar, and sour fruit juice. So, in medieval Europe, the diet was basically sweet and sour drinks, mainly wine, beer, and milk. With the development of ocean trade, vegetables, fruits, and seasonings from all over the world were shipped to Europe, greatly enriching the local menu. And, for example, in the early 18th century, Hans Sloane, president of the Royal Society in London, learned a recipe from the Maya in America, adding milk and sugar to cocoa to create a so-called stomach medicine. This mixture is essentially hot milk chocolate. Once introduced to Britain, this drink was immediately popular with the locals and became a trendy beverage. Oh, more famous examples include potatoes from America, coffee beans from Asia, tea from Asia, etc. These plants completely changed Europeans' eating habits, and the quest for green gold inspired generations of botanists. Modern meat. In 18th century France, botany was the second most state-funded discipline, second only to cartography. The study of plants was definitely the cutting-edge topic at the time. For instance, Carl Linnaeus, the father of modern taxonomy and a famous Swedish botanist, firmly believed that studying natural species could enhance his homeland's strength. He had an ideal to transplant tropical plants like cotton and mulberry trees to freezing Sweden to prevent the outflow of silver from his country. Although he didn't succeed, Linnaeus had this grand ambition, which also shows that botanical research was a vibrant discipline back then. To carry out related scientific exploration, the most fundamental need was to collect as many species as possible. From the West Indies to Sri Lanka, then to the Cape of Good Hope and Java, loads of novel plants were unearthed by botanists and brought back to Europe from these remote areas. A scholar named Charles introduced 900 new plant species from the West Indies to Europe, while German naturalist Humboldt brought back nearly 60,000 plants from South America, directly increasing Europe's total botanical collection by 5%. And in botanical gardens affiliated with universities or hospitals, large quantities of herbs for medicinal research were also cultivated. Thus, European botanical gardens were filled with exotic flowers and plants from around the world for scholars to study. So, with such abundant resources, Europeans' exploration of plants' medicinal value advanced rapidly, and they successfully developed many effective drugs. For example, plants like guaiacum for treating syphilis and Peruvian balsam for coughs were required courses in 18th century botany, even in European medical training. So, beyond studying samples shipped back to Europe, many doctors or pharmacologists would personally travel to colonial regions for field research. Upon arrival, they'd actively consult local indigenous people to quickly learn about potentially medicinal plants. Take French physician Pierre Poivre, who settled in the Caribbean specifically to improve his medical skills and learned many remedies from locals. Poivre once remarked that Black people had more expertise than whites regarding medicinal knowledge of many plants. With help from these pharmacological researchers, vast amounts of medicinal knowledge from Africa, America, and elsewhere spread back to Europe. Precisely because of their economic and scientific value, precious plant resources sparked fierce competition among nations. European overseas trading companies, caravans, and even navies paid botanists to hunt for valuable species worldwide. Famous French naturalist Michel Addison worked for the Compagnie des Indes in Africa, tasked with collecting as many plants as possible for the king in Senegal. Addison fulfilled his mission impressively. In 1749 alone, he sent at least 300 sapling species to Paris's Royal Botanical Garden. And then, by the late 18th century, Europeans had established 1,600 botanical gardens globally for agricultural research and rare plant cultivation. Naturally, countries maintained strict control over plant resources. For instance, cinchona tree bark, an excellent malaria treatment, was primarily grown in South America. Local governments decreed that anyone caught smuggling cinchona trees out would face imprisonment or even execution. Rare, the cultivation of plant specimens was kept under strict secrecy. In modern terms, valuable plant varieties were bottleneck technologies for European nations back then. Driven by huge profits, some risked everything. Botanists even resorted to illegal smuggling to steal precious species. The most famous example in this regard involves cochineal insects. Coccacino are beetles rich in red dye. Drying and grinding them yields vibrant red-orange pigment. It takes 150,000 insects to produce 1 kilogram, making it extremely valuable. What's even trickier is that cochineal insects can only live on specific cacti. To raise them, you've got to grow those cacti too. These cacti originally grew in what's now Mexico, then a Spanish colony. In the 1700s, Spain monopolized cochineal farming and dye trade, producing under 700 tons yearly, yet making 500,000 pounds profit from European markets with this dye. The French absolutely adored clothes and carpets dyed with cochineal.
So France had huge demand. Seeing such wealth slip away, their government couldn't just sit back.
In 1776, the French Navy funded botanist Thierry de Menonville to infiltrate Mexico and steal precious cochineal and cacti. The government promised him a sky-high reward if he succeeded in breeding cochineal in France. Of course, if caught, they deny involvement, no admitting they masterminded it.
Spain fiercely guarded its secret all along.
To prevent theft, they tightened colonial border checks, making legal entry impossible for Thierry.
But he was dead set on getting cochineal and cacti by any means necessary.
Thus, this botanical expedition unfolded like a full-blown spy thriller. First, Thierry posed as a doctor to explain carrying various jars and bottles. He claimed they held medicines, but their real purpose was preserving plant samples.
He also flaunted a gold-plated cane and diamond ring to appear aristocratic.
This grandeur reduced suspicion. After all, what noble would cross oceans just to steal a cactus? Plus, the outfit let him mingle at officials' parties to build connections. With this aristocratic doctor persona, Thierry secured a pass into Veracruz, Mexico. Afterward, he traveled villages practicing medicine and collecting herbs, quizzing locals about medicinal plants. Even so, Thierry still couldn't get a permit to go to the cochineal production area. But he gritted his teeth and trekked directly into the heart of that territory. Along the way, he had to sneak into the most remote corners to avoid being detected. He wrote in his memoir that during this journey, he faced inspections by 6 governors and 30 local officials, trekking 720 miles in 20 days. Finally, from an indigenous person in a remote village, he successfully acquired live cochineal insects and cactus plants. He hid these treasures in a leather case to protect the live plants and stuffed it with other branches to conceal them. However, at customs, someone recognized the cacti, but Thierry used his skill of muddying the waters again.
He claimed the cacti were ingredients for gout ointment and spouted Latin terms, leaving the inspectors baffled.
Ultimately, Thierry successfully escaped Mexico and returned to France safely. As soon as Thierry returned home, he received high honors. He was immediately appointed as the king's botanist. This title came with a permanent annual salary of 6,000 livres, twice that of a member of the Paris Royal Academy of Sciences. Theory.
In French colonies, a dedicated cactus plantation was established to produce cochineal dye.
However, within less than 2 years of stealing the cochineal, Theory contracted a fever and died young at age 41. From today's perspective, Thierry is undoubtedly a national hero to the French, but to Spaniards, he is a downright plant thief, and this story is just the tip of the iceberg of European nations' scramble for plant resources in the 18th century. Governments, merchants, and scholars alike placed immense value on plants. During this period, various novel plants were sent back to Europe, and their functions and uses were fully developed and utilized. While sorting through historical materials on 18th century plant studies, a particular plant caught the author's great interest: goldenrod. In the second part, we'll discuss why the author is so focused on this plant. Using goldenrod's medicinal value as a starting point, the author unfolds a series of discussions on politics, medicine, and gender relations. One question, 1. Goldenrod, also known as yang jinfeng or yellow butterfly, is a tree in the dicotyledon class, Rosales order, typically growing 2 to 3 meters tall. Its most striking feature is its orange-red flowers, shaped like a flying phoenix, highly ornamental. Thus, it has become one of the common street ornamental trees in many southern Chinese cities. Today, goldenrod is mainly ornamental, but in some 18th century American colonies it had another terrifying use: abortion. Historical analysis suggests goldenrod likely originated in South America or Africa, later spreading to the Caribbean via ocean trade. Caribbean records show locals used it to treat menstrual disorders. Higher doses induced abortion with relatively low bodily harm. The author finds it curious that while Europeans learned to cultivate goldenrod, its abortive knowledge remained confined to colonies, despite extensive research. No European records document goldenrod's use as an abortifacient. Given medicinal plant research was a hot topic, the author wonders, what blocked this knowledge from reaching Europe? This curiosity stems from 16th to 18th century records showing massive European demand for abortion, but how widespread was it really? Records show 600 documented abortion cases in France in 1660 alone. These records came from court cases since abortion was illegal in France then.
Catherine, a court midwife, claimed to have performed 2,500 abortions, leading to her execution.
Europeans sought abortions for various reasons, some due to health risks from problematic pregnancies. Others, impregnated by lovers, risked abortion to avoid exposure. Of course, some aimed to prevent inheritance disputes by limiting births, fueling demand for underground abortion methods. For example, rumors that juniper leaves induced abortion forced Berlin parks to fence off juniper trees as visitors aggressively harvested them. These folk remedies were unsafe. Juniper caused severe uterine damage. Overdosing may cause massive bleeding, putting pregnant women's lives at risk. For instance, in Paris at that time, the primary abortion tools were hands and sharp metal instruments. Due to improper methods, there were numerous reports of abortion-related casualties across European countries. Yet in seemingly backward colonial regions, relatively safer abortion methods existed, using gentler herbal remedies. Solid evidence shows that before Europeans arrived, indigenous Americans widely used herbs for abortion. Abortifacients were part of daily life. In 1799, a scholar traveling in present-day Venezuela documented the lives of the local Macushi people. He found women actively delayed childbirth to participate in labor while young, using herbs for abortion or contraception. The scholar also noted these remedies didn't harm their health. Additionally, Native American women knew plant-based abortion methods because childbirth was inconvenient during hunting with men. In the Caribbean, goldenrod was the most widely used abortifacient herb among women. And particularly in the 18th century, numerous records document goldenrod use for induced abortion. Those who consumed goldenrod were female slaves here. They chose abortion to resist slave owners' brutal rule. Female slaves often endured greater suffering than males. Beyond daily grueling labor, female slaves became sex tools,
forced to serve as plantation owners and soldiers.
Others were assigned to male slaves as partners to breed more plantation workers through pregnancy. But these women refused to subject offspring to enslavement. Abortion became their only choice in places like Dominica. A priest once wrote that when black women self-aborted, slave owners couldn't profit from them.
French Dr. Compère expressed similar views in 1802.
He believed female slaves' wretched lives made them vehemently opposed to raising children. Many female slaves secretly sought goldenrod to terminate pregnancies upon discovery. Thus, slavery's exploitation of women unexpectedly popularized abortifacients in these regions. Even today, though slavery has ended, herbal abortion remains a mainstream folk practice on some Caribbean islands. But why didn't this herbal abortion knowledge spread to Europe? After all, there was huge demand there too. Was it because goldenrod wasn't grown in Europe? Actually, no. Goldenrod was easily introduced to Europe due to its superb ornamental value. As early as 1666, the Paris Royal Botanical Gardens planting catalog recorded goldenrod. By 1682, goldenrod appeared at Amsterdam's Botanical Gardens and London's Chelsea Physic Garden.
Among European gardeners, this beautiful flower was widely known. Its bright red-orange hue made it popular. Some even grew 5-meter-tall specimens.
Yet despite cultivation, its medicinal knowledge never spread. The reasons require examining both colonial and European perspectives. First, colonial officials and plantation owners actively suppressed information about goldenrod's abortive properties. The primary reason was demand for population and economic growth. The author notes that population determined a colony's prosperity, wealth, and power. Officials did everything to increase it. For example, in 1668, the governor of the New Indian Islands lowered marriage ages to 14 for girls and 18 for boys to boost population. He specifically urged local companies to increase island populations to raise profits. Given this growth imperative, colonial elites surely blocked abortion knowledge. Moreover, increasing birth rates was a top priority for colonial doctors. In French colonies, medical institutions and midwives prevented slave loss from abortion or infanticide. Some regions even enforced laws compelling all slaves to report pregnancies immediately to midwives. Slaves or midwives aiding abortion faced severe punishment with the mother. Beyond demographics, the author analyzes gender ratios. Most early colonial explorers were men. Columbus's second voyage had 1,500 men across 17 ships without a single woman. For example, in 1613, in the Caribbean St. Christopher, the entire area had only 2 European women. Undoubtedly, men dominated the development of plants' medicinal values in various colonial ventures. Although this was part of the colonial industry, the focus at the time was on how to use tree bark to treat soldiers' malaria, or which roots could prevent sailors from getting fevers. And considering the colonies, professionals here, whether doctors, botanists, or administrators, were almost exclusively men. Relatively speaking, there was a lack of focus on women, and exploration of herbs for women's needs was minimal. Back in Europe, religious, legal, and other reasons also prevented the spread of knowledge related to goldenrod, abortion drugs, etc. As the mainstream faith in Europe, Christianity considered abortion immoral. Church courts imposed penitential punishments of 1 to 10 years on those who aborted. And similarly, to increase population, many European countries enacted extremely harsh laws to restrict abortion. For example, Article 317 of the Napoleonic Code in 1810 prohibited voluntary abortion by pregnant women who had already felt fetal movement. In Britain, abortion for pregnant women who hadn't felt fetal movement was a felony, punishable by fines and imprisonment. But for those who had felt fetal movement, if they aborted privately, they could even be sentenced to death. Suppression from religion, law, etc. directly stagnated medical research related to abortion. In this oppressive atmosphere, even simple experiments on plant medicinal properties were greatly hindered. Drug trials for abortion pills Almost no one did it anymore. Of course, some doctors for special purposes would still perform abortions privately, but they would absolutely not publicize such matters. In 1598, a British doctor wrote that he knew many plants, flowers had abortive effects, but he dared not speak of it. Now, also, the famous Dr. Astruc clearly mentioned that for over a century, doctors did not mention abortion in their writings or lectures on childbirth, treating abortion drug research as taboo, and even by the 20th century, it hadn't recovered. No. In 1925, a German published manual on abortion had to state on its cover that the book should be locked away for storage. As a result, serious scientific research on abortion has been consistently hindered, while some folk remedies spread underground. Compared to abortion drugs, other female-related drug research in Europe didn't stop. In the 18th century, naturalists and doctors extensively experimented with various drugs to regulate menstruation. For instance, in 1720, Dr. Freund in London tried using menstrual regulating drugs to delay periods and recorded his research in a book on menstruation regulation. So not all female drug research was banned. Only the spread of knowledge about abortion drugs was artificially blocked. Overall, under influences like economics, gender, religion, and law, abortion-related drug research became taboo, leading to the case of goldenrod. Um, this herb, popular in the colonies, was never tested as an abortion drug in Europe or included in major European pharmacopoeias. Looking at the author's historical digging into goldenrod, it reveals a unique way of thinking about problems. Generally, many people wonder why something happened, while the author focuses on why something didn't happen. For example, the book spends a long section discussing why goldenrod wasn't used by Europeans for abortion. By exploring this, it uncovers underlying social, political, and scientific reasons. Does this unique problem-solving approach inspire you too? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Looking back at this book, we see how plants like grains and medicinal herbs played key roles in history. And European colonial nations gained huge profits and scientific progress by controlling plant resources, building so-called empires. As world history enters a new chapter, plant use now has a fairer global consensus, letting countries develop their own resources without great power coercion. Undoubtedly, in the future, plants will keep accompanying humanity, silently pushing society forward. All right, that wraps up our interpretation of Plants and Empire for you. The listening notes are below the audio. See you next time.